Hey guys, I want to take a few minutes today just to talk about my top 5 or so cornerbacks from the upcoming 2022 NFL Draft and some of the schemes I think they could play well in at the next level. Now, I'm not going to say I don't have a full script prepared for this. I'm doing this mostly off of memory at this point, which is a good thing because I feel like it actually makes me have to understand the cornerbacks and the prospects and try to memorize this stuff so I'm able to pull it basically out of thin air if I need it ever for a live show or something like that. But I got a little document with me right here that has the names, of course, of the players. I want to read it out to you in the current order I have because I'm working on an updated top 50 or so big board for all the corners that are going to be out there potentially in the draft. I might narrow it down to 30 because realistically 50 are probably not going to go, but we'll see. Number 1, Stingley Jr., no surprise there. Injuries, of course, are the biggest concern, the biggest limiting factor for him right now. Even this year, he looked a little disinterested when he was playing. Stingley, of course, had legendary tape, historic tape in 2019, where he was one of the best corners college football has ever seen in a single season. He was incredible that year. Now, of course, last year was injured as well, didn't play many snaps, kind of had some decent tape, but not fantastic. And this year, like I said, you might as well just throw everything we saw out. It's pretty difficult to evaluate him because you have all the physical traits you could ever want for a corner, and you saw what he did in 2019. And that keeps popping up whenever you're trying to evaluate him. And I keep coming back to him as a blue chip prospect because of that stuff he did in 2019. And I think he can do that again, but you haven't seen that in 2 years now. So you are a little worried that, maybe this is a bit of an overhyped player based on a one-year wonder type situation, but we'll see. I still have a lot of optimism for him, which is why he's my top corner. And as far as scheme goes, I think he can play almost any scheme you want to because he has all the physical tools. I would love to see him mostly in a man scheme if you can do that, just because I think he'll be perfectly fine, perfectly fluid when it comes to mirroring players, mirroring receivers. And I would love to see him, like I said, get involved in a little bit of everything scheme-wise because I think he has that kind of ability to play and excel in most areas of the defense. Number 2, Kaiir Elam. To me, Elam is bigger than I thought he would be going into this year. Like when I first started really watching him, he was taller than I expected, a little bit heavier too. And I'm not saying heavy isn't a bad term. He just weighs more than I expected. And it's a good weight too. It's good physical weight for Elam to play at. I view him more as a zone kind of corner, someone who might get in the press every now and then because he does have, like I said, the size, the physicality to potentially make an impact in press coverage. I think he'll have the length that will really help him out in that area too. I just worry sometimes about his mobility not necessarily being on the same level of fluidity as someone like a Derek Stingley or an Andrew Booth, where he might not be able to mirror guys quite as well and then stick with them all the way down the field throughout a variety of routes and stuff like that. So I think Elam may be better in more of a zone-based scheme because I think he is still a tremendous player. I know there's a little bit of this idea about fuller corners out there, but you don't scout the helmet, you scout the player. Elam to me is a very good player, and he's going to be probably picked in the top half of the draft this year, top half of the first round this year. But I think more of a zone scheme would help him a little bit. Next up, Trent McDuffie for me is number 3. I know people have reservations about him because of his height. I don't think he's going to be, I think he's like 5'8", 5'9" right now. So he's not that big of a corner, but he's never had trouble tackling guys. He's super physical when coming down to try to deal with ball carriers. So I have no problem with that. He tackles well, by the way. One of the best tacklers in this class for corners. So I feel very comfortable with that kind of focus on him. He has not played a lot in the slot in college. It's mainly been an outside corner, which is a good thing because you don't really want to draft a slot corner in the first round. For his projection, it's hard. Washington plays a little bit of like a hybrid defense sometimes. I know I'm seeing guys from Washington come in the NFL and play well in zone, and they play well in man coverage as well. It's hard to kind of predict how guys will kind of jump from that defense to the NFL. McDuffie, as far as I know, is not a next level athlete. I don't think he'll be on the same level as someone like an Andrew Booth or Derek Stingley as far as being able to mirror guys. So I think that McDuffie right now, a conservative projection for him, because I would still like to see him try man coverage in the NFL, but a conservative projection for him, put him in zone and put him in off man, give him a lot of space to work with. Don't have him right up on guys on the line of scrimmage and kind of see where it goes from there. I do project him to be a player who's going to go in the first round, though. It came as a shock to me. Some people still consider him potentially not being a first-round guy. I view him as definitely a first-round player. So McDuffie's my number 3. Number 4, Ahmad Gardner from Cincinnati. Maybe the best corner in college football this year. I know his teammate Kobe Bryant actually won the award for the best defensive back in college football, but the 3 most productive corners in college football to me this year, for this draft class at least, were Ahmad Gardner, Trent McDuffie, and Roger McCreary. So I got Gardner at 4. Some concerns with him, very physical, sometimes overly physical, could get called for some holding penalties in the NFL, that kind of stuff. A little bit high-hipped in terms of his ability maybe to turn and maybe to stick with some of the faster receivers in the league. But, like I said, he's so physical that you play him in press man coverage. Up at the line of scrimmage, let him jam guys, let him get his hands into them, which he does very well. And he's a bigger guy, too. I think he's a 6'2", 6'3", 200 pounds, something like that. He's going to be able to stick with guys. He'll lay the hammer, too, when he has to. If you just let him get his hands into guys at the line of scrimmage, I think he'll do very well. And maybe those limitations in terms of the speed or the ability to just flick his hips won't be such a big deal if you just let him get into guys at the line of scrimmage. So, press coverage for Ahmad Gardner. I think everyone kind of saw it coming. Roger McCreary, corner number 5 for Auburn. I think he could go as high as 3, honestly, in terms of this cornerback board because he's been tried so much at Auburn. I think he had like 17 targets against Alabama. He gave up more of those yards later in the game as he clearly started to look a little more fatigued in the second half because Auburn had been out there for so many defensive snaps. But he held Mechie for quite a few of those plays. He was really good against Alabama. Even though he gave a lot of yardage, I think the completion percentage against him was in the 30s. It was really low. He had an excellent game despite the fact that he gave up a bunch of yardage. So Roger McCreary, to me, he's the guy who I really trust to do almost everything, if I'm being honest with you. Because I've seen him play up on guys at the line of scrimmage. Has not been the most physical guy in press coverage, but still has the fluidity, has the speed. Just stick with guys. He did a tremendous job of just being on a guy's hip and then making a play on the ball. Even on plays going over the middle of the field, which are usually very slanted towards the wide receiver in terms of their ability to get open. McCreary will make plays in the middle of the field like that, and he'll just go from being on a guy's hip to jumping in front of him and knocking the ball down. He had an excellent season. I think a highly underrated player going to this draft who I think could be a top 16 guy. I would not rule it out because of how good he was this year. I want to see him in man coverage, and I want to see him have the opportunity to press guys. I don't think he'll win in press coverage the same way Ahmad Gardner will, not by getting into guys physically, but probably by kind of just giving them a little bit of a bump and being able to stick with them. Because I trust his ability to mirror receivers off the line of scrimmage and just stick with them throughout the entire route. And I'll do one more because I got one more player I view as potentially being a first-round corner, and that's Andrew Booth Jr. from Clemson. I got to briefly see play in person while I was there. Andrew Booth, to me, has some flaws. Played a lot of zone coverage in Clemson. And I think he could be potentially a scheme transcendent because he has the physicality to do it, the physicality and the athleticism to be a guy who can play basically any kind of coverage scheme you want him to. But he played mostly zone in Clemson. It's going to be a bit of a learning curve for him jumping into the NFL. I like initially start him off in off-man coverage and play him in zone and kind of go from there. See how you feel about him playing press coverage. See about how you feel about him playing closer to the line of scrimmage and stuff like that. Because we've seen him, he's a tremendous tackler. In terms of physicality, he's always willing to run downhill, make a play on the ball. He's blown up screens where he's thrown the blocker back into the receiver and tackle both of the guys. He's blown up run plays. Sometimes he gets a little bit out of control coming downhill, so he needs to focus on taking better angles and playing a little bit more under control. But overall, I love his fluidity, his athleticism. I think he's got enough speed to make an impact and stick with the guys downfield. There have been times in man coverage where he's gotten beaten deep, though. I think a little bit is inexperience because he does not have as many coverage reps in college as guys like Roger McCreary or Ahmad Gardner. He's relatively new to the upper echelon of corners in college football, so I think it's going to take him a little while to get to that point in the NFL, which is why I don't want to throw him into press coverage immediately once he hits the league. I think he's so athletic, though. I have a hard time pigeonholing him as a zone coverage corner because of how athletic he is, because I know he has the ability to play man coverage well. He's got great ball skills, and like I said, there were times in tape where he ended up on the ground, though, unfortunately. His balance almost got lost or he slipped. I'm curious to see if he can iron those out, if those will transition to the NFL, because if they do, then I'd be a little concerned. But if he can get rid of that and kind of work that out of his game, you're looking at a guy who could really play almost any place you want him to in the NFL because of the athleticism he has, which is at the level to play press man coverage that you want to and stick with guys. But we'll wait and see. I'm interested to see his true combine numbers in terms of the 40 times just to see how fast he is. Because I don't know, and he won't be blazing speed, but I want to see what kind of category he falls in to really determine where he should stick in the NFL. But for now, those are my top 6 corners and the schemes I envision them having or envision them playing in the NFL, and some of the best and worst traits about each one of them.